My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates.
America poured everything best about itself into Forrest Gump. History, war, music, pain, love, and even that deeply innocent kind of hope. It was a masterpiece, a piece of Hollywood memory, and the movie an entire generation talks about with both love and pride. But there is one thing even an immortal masterpiece cannot hold on to. It cannot keep the people who made it safe from time. 32 years have gone by. And behind that are lives full of upheaval. One man lived through the cruelest tragedy a father can endure. One child star was once loved by all of America, then grew up surrounded by loss and public trouble. And one television icon lived for years with psychological darkness the audience never saw. Today we're going to look back at the Forrest Gump cast after 32 years, and trust me, a few of these stories are going to leave you speechless. Number 1, Tom Hanks as Forrest Gump. Let's start with the man who only had to sit down on a park bench to make all of America go quiet and listen. Tom Hanks. When Forrest Gump came out in 1994, he was 38. This year he is 70, and by the time he took this role, Hanks was no longer just that likable comedy actor from the earlier years. He had already been through Big A League of Their Own Sleepless in Seattle and had just won an Oscar for Philadelphia. But Forrest Gump was the movie that took him from a major star to a real icon. After this performance, Hanks won Best Actor at the Oscars for the second year in a row, such a rare milestone that people had to bring up Spencer Tracy's name just to show how big it really was. But his real life was never as smooth or glorious as his career. His parents divorced when he was still a kid. Hanks has said he grew up on lonely Greyhound bus rides between two homes, and that feeling of not belonging stayed with him a long time. Then in 2013, he went public about having type 2 diabetes after years of his body paying the price for gaining and losing weight for roles. And just when people thought his life had finally settled down in 2025, his daughter E.A. Hanks published a memoir describing a childhood full of violence and deprivation while mostly living with her mother after the divorce in 1987. What is admirable is that he never let any of it drown him. After Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks kept moving forward with Apollo 13 Saving Private Ryan, The Green Mile, Castaway, and many other major films. In 2024, he even reunited with Robin Wright and Robert Zemeckis in Here, like a beautiful handshake with old memories. Hanks has also said he is glad Forrest Gump never got a sequel because some movies ought to be left whole. I think he is right. Some roles should not be stretched any further. They ought to be kept the way they are, like a beautiful memory, exactly the way Americans still remember Tom Hanks as a man who went through all kinds of storms and still never lost his dignity. Number 2, Robin Wright as Jenny Curran. The next name is the woman a whole lot of American men in the 90s could never forget Robin Wright as Jenny Curran. When Forrest Gump came out in 1994, she was 28. This year, Robin Wright is 60. Before this movie, she was already a familiar face thanks to Santa Barbara, and especially The Princess Bride. But Jenny was the role that planted her firmly in the public memory. That performance earned her Golden Globe and SAG nominations, enough to prove Robin Wright was not just a beautiful face on screen, but a real actress with real weight. After Forrest Gump, Robin Wright did not take the loud route. She chose a steadier path. There was Moll Flanders, there was She's So Lovely, and then, years later, came a major breakout with House of Cards. Claire Underwood was the role that turned her from a beautiful woman people remembered from the movies into someone cold, powerful, and fully capable of dominating modern television. In 2014, she even won a Golden Globe for that role. Robin Wright's private life was not nearly as gentle as her appearance. She and Sean Penn started their relationship in 1989, had children before marrying in 1996, then broke up and got back together several times before divorcing in 2010. Robin herself called that breakup devastating, and the price she paid was not just in marriage. Robin has said that during her years as a mother, she was the one who had to pull back on her career more because the family always needed somebody there with the kids, and that somebody was usually her. Then, when she stepped into House of Cards, she had to fight one more battle, this time over salary. Robin said she was told outright that she could not be paid the same as Kevin Spacey because she did not have an Oscar. She did not accept that, kept pushing, and forced the system to change.
And it's like 4 in the morning, and it's like, okay, we have to dance. Jenny, and it's New Year's Eve, and Jenny and Forrest are going to
control. In 2024, she reunited with Tom Hanks and Robert Zemeckis in here, like a beautiful reunion with the memory of Forrest Gump. That same year, when the arguments over Jenny started up again, Robin did not dodge it. She said plainly that Jenny was not exactly a villain, but she absolutely did treat Forrest unfairly. By 2025, she said she still believes in love even after 3 failed marriages and that she is with Henry Smith. Number 3, Gary Sinise as Lieutenant Dan Taylor. Let's get to the man who turned Lieutenant Dan into the deepest wound in Forrest Gump, Gary Sinise. When the movie came out in 1994, he was 39. This year, Gary Sinise is 71. Before becoming the face every mainstream audience could recognize, he already had a very strong stage background, co-founding Steppenwolf Theater when he was still very young and meeting his future wife Moira right there. The two of them married in 1981, and to this day that marriage has stayed with him through nearly his entire adult life. His role as Lieutenant Dan later brought Sinise an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor, and it was also the performance that pushed his name deep into America's memory. Then tragedy hit his family in the cruelest possible way. In the summer of 2018, his wife Moira was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. Less than 2 months later, his son Mac was diagnosed with chordoma, an extremely rare cancer that starts in the spine and affects only about 300 people in America each year on average. Moira had to go through chemotherapy and radiation. Mac had his first tumor surgery in September 2018. Then in 2019, the disease came back and started spreading. Mac went through 5 spinal surgeries between 2018 and 2020. The tumor slowly left him paralyzed from the chest down and also limited his arms. Gary Sinise said that from 2019 on, he more or less stopped acting so he could put all his energy into his family. He called himself an air traffic controller for his son, the person who had to think for him, worry for him, arrange everything so Mac would not have to carry one more fear about treatment. During that same stretch, his father had a stroke, and Gary also had to take on the responsibility of caring for his mother. Then on January 5, 2024, Mac died at 33 after a 5.5-year battle. What makes people admire Gary Sinise is not how well he endured it. It is that he still got back up and chose to keep living usefully. He stepped away from Hollywood, moved to the Nashville area in Tennessee, stayed close to his daughters and 5 grandchildren, and held onto family as the most important thing he had left. He also made sure Mac's music would keep being heard, gathering the music his son left behind and releasing it to support the foundation. At 71, Gary Sinise is still here, but his biggest priority now is no longer movies. It is family, the memory of his son, and the people he has chosen to stand beside for decades. Number 4, Sally Field as Mrs. Gump. How could we possibly leave out the woman who gave Forrest Gump
a bit on the
its
slow
deepest
side.
heart, Sally Field? When the movie came out in 1994, she was 48. This year she is 80. And honestly, by the time she played Mrs. Gump, Sally Field was already a legend. She came into the film with 2 Oscars, 3 Emmys, and a career long enough that nobody needed to validate her stature anymore. The interesting thing is that she is only 10 years older than Tom Hanks, and yet the audience believed right away that she was his mother from beginning to end. That role even brought her SAG and BAFTA nominations, a very clear reminder that Mrs. Gump was not just a warm supporting role, but the emotional pillar of the whole movie. But the most unforgettable part of Sally Field's story sits outside the screen. In her memoir In Pieces, she said she had been sexually abused throughout childhood by her stepfather's stuntman, Jock Mahoney, until she was about 14. That was not some little scratch. That is the kind of thing that stays with a person for a very long time, quietly and cruelly. Then by the end of her teenage years, Sally Field fell into severe depression. She spoke plainly about that stretch of life, without dodging it, without polishing it up like someone who has lived long enough not to be afraid of the truth anymore. Once you hear those things and then look back at Mrs. Gump, you can see why Sally Field was able to bring such a strange kind of strength into that mother soft, but never weak. And life did not let go of her as she got older. In 2005, Sally Field was diagnosed with osteoporosis just before turning 60, even though she said she had lived a pretty disciplined life. Then, in 2024, she publicly spoke about having to undergo an illegal abortion at 17 in 1964, an experience she described as traumatic and horrifying. But Sally Field did not let the past define all of her. She kept going, kept working, kept her dignity, and in 2023 received the Saji Life Achievement Award, a deeply deserved milestone for a whole lifetime in acting. Number 5, Mykelti Williamson as Benjamin Buford, Bubba Blue. When the movie came out in 1994, Mykelti Williamson was 37. This year he is 69. And what matters here is that Williamson was not the kind of face that just fell out of nowhere because of one lucky role. Before Forrest Gump, he had already been working for years, already had films, already had television. Bubba became the defining role of Mykelti Williamson's life, but it also made him pay a really bitter price. Bubba's fake lip looked so real on screen that after the movie blew up, a lot of people in the business did not realize it was still the same actor they had seen in all kinds of films and series before. Williamson said flat out that he could barely get work after Forrest Gump because people thought Robert Zemeckis had just found some total unknown and put him in front of the camera. That is the kind of irony only Hollywood could come up with, a role that makes your name and then instantly hides you behind itself. Even so, he did not disappear. He kept working, moving through Con Air, Ollie Fences, 24 Justified, and many other projects, but to the public, he is still Bubba first. Then there was another irritation, quieter and somehow even sadder. The Bubba Gump Shrimp Company restaurant chain grew in real life out of the very legacy that character left behind, but Mykelti Williamson said he had never set foot in one because nobody had ever invited him in a way that felt decent or respectful enough. He said the soul of Bubba, especially that obsession with shrimp, was largely something he himself brought into the role, not something already sitting there on the page the way people assume. Hearing that, you realize sometimes an actor can pour his whole soul into a character, but once that character goes out into the world, he ends up standing outside watching it live another life. And that was not even all. In 1998, Williamson got caught up in a very serious criminal case after stabbing his ex-wife's boyfriend. He was arrested, taken to court, and eventually acquitted by a jury on the charge of attempted manslaughter. That alone is enough to shake a life apart, even if the final verdict gave him back his legal innocence.
Number 6, Michael Connor Humphreys as young Forrest Gump.
When Forrest Gump came out in 1994, he was only 9. This year he is 41. What makes it special is that Humphreys had never been a professional actor before that. He auditioned through an open casting call, pretty much just a regular kid from Mississippi walking straight into a major movie. And that kid left a bigger mark than people realize because Tom Hanks later admitted he based Forrest's southern voice on Humphrey's natural accent. In other words, Michael did not just play young Forrest, he helped shape the very character Tom Hanks carried through the whole film. Unlike a lot of other child stars, Humphreys did not keep charging into Hollywood. He grew up pretty quietly then, after 9/11 decided to join the military. CBS reported that by 2005, he had served 18 months in Anbar, Iraq. And this is where his story took a much heavier turn. After coming home, Humphrey struggled with PTSD and admitted there was a long stretch where he could barely get anything meaningful done. That is the kind of crash that feels very real, very manly, and very sad too, because the little boy who once made audiences cheer on screen had to walk through a real war in real life. What is valuable is that he did not vanish completely. In an interview from 2021, Humphreys said he was slowly returning to acting, taking acting classes in Portland and doing small stage roles. No noise, no trying to drag back old glory. Just a man who had been through war, been through PTSD, and was trying to reopen a door that had been closed for a very long time. Number 7. Hannah R. Hall as young Jenny Curran. Let's get to the little girl who invited Forrest to sit down in that empty seat on the bus and accidentally opened up the longest love story in the whole movie, Hannah R. Hall. When Forrest Gump came out in 1994, she was 10. This year, Hannah Hall is 42. This was her film debut after being picked from an open casting call when she was still very young. After Forrest Gump, Hannah Hall did not blow up like some child star who suddenly takes over the tabloids. She took a quieter road, but not a short one. Hall kept showing up in The Virgin Suicides, then later Halloween Masters of Sex, The Purge, and a bunch of other projects. What stands out is that Hannah Hall's public life has been pretty calm, especially next to the heavier stories tied to other Forrest Gump cast members. No major scandal, no loud public crash, no kind of mess that overshadowed her career. The most notable thing about her is actually a pretty surprising career turn. Hall kept studying, then moved into intimacy coordination for film and television, working on projects like Daisy Jones and The Six, I'm a Virgo, and Twisted Metal. That is a very different job from the image of young Jenny people remember, but it says a lot too. She did not cling to old glory. She found a more grown-up way to stay in the same industry. Number 8, Haley Joel Osment as Forrest Gump Jr. Do not let this little boy's short screen time fool you, because Haley Joel Osment ended up being one of the wildest turns out of all the Forrest Gump child stars. When the movie came out in 1994, he was only 6. This year he is 38. Haley's path started with a Pizza Hut commercial, then quickly led to the role of Forrest Jr., the son who appears at the end of the movie but changes the whole meaning of the story. And that was only the beginning. Just a few years later, Haley truly exploded with The Sixth Sense, got an Oscar nomination for supporting actor at just 11, and became one of the most famous child stars in America in the late 90s. But growing up in public was never going to be an easy road. In 2006, when he was just 18, Haley got into a car accident, then later got probation after not contesting charges of drunk driving and minor drug possession. He also had to go through an alcohol education program, and Alcoholics Anonymous. Then in 2018, he got pulled into another public incident at the Las Vegas airport after missing a flight. That was not the worst of it, but it was enough to show that Haley's public life was no longer moving in a straight line like it did when he was that gifted little boy everybody adored. 2025 was when things really got darkest. Haley lost his home in the Eaton fire in Altadena. Not long after that, he was arrested in Mammoth Lakes on charges tied to public intoxication and cocaine. After body cam footage came out, Haley publicly apologized for using anti-Semitic language and said he was in a very low place mentally. In June 2025, the court placed him in a 1-year diversion program which required AA and therapy. Even so, he has not left the screen. Haley appears in Wednesday Season 2. Number 9, Siobhan Fallon Hogan as Dorothy Harris. Some faces are only on screen for a few minutes, but people remember them for 30 years. And Siobhan Fallon Hogan is exactly that kind of face. In Forrest Gump, she plays Dorothy Harris, the school bus driver who tells Forrest the bus is not a taxi, then accidentally becomes part of one of the opening scenes everybody remembers. When the movie came out in 1994, she was 33. This year, she is 65. Before and after that small role, Siobhan Fallon Hogan followed the path of a very American character actress. She had been on Saturday Night Live Seinfeld, then kept showing up in familiar movies like Men in Black, The Negotiator Holes, and Daddy Daycare. Put simply, Dorothy Harris did not make her, but it is one of those small roles that instantly lets the audience feel she belongs in the world of Forrest Gump. What stands out about Siobhan Fallon Hogan is not scandal or some big public collapse. It is the way she built her career. After school, she struggled to get cast on New York stages to the point that she had to write and perform one-woman shows herself just to get attention. Then once she finally made it into Hollywood, she did not choose to live by chasing the spotlight full-time. She has said she wanted to raise her 3 children on the Jersey Shore, work only 1 or 2 months a year if possible, and was willing to turn down roles that went against her faith or human dignity. That is not a glamorous choice, but it says a lot about her backbone. In recent years, Siobhan Fallon Hogan has gone even further. She has not just acted, she has also written, produced, and distributed independent films herself, with her family like Rushed and Shelter in Solitude. She has also said that the inspiration for Shelter in Solitude came from the final months of her father's life after a long stretch of dialysis. By 2026, she had stepped into yet another role, hosting the podcast Catholics and Cappuccinos for EWTN. Number 10. Peter Dobson as young Elvis Presley. Not every role in Forrest Gump needs a lot of screen time to leave a mark, and Peter Dobson is a very good example of that. When the movie came out in 1994, he was 30. This year he is 62. In the movie, Dobson plays a young Elvis Presley, the man who watches little Forrest dance in his leg braces and accidentally turns those moves into part of his own performance style. Peter Dobson was never an A-list star, but he was a very familiar face in American movies in the late 80s and 90s. Before and after Forrest Gump, he showed up in films like Sing Last Exit to Brooklyn, The Marrying Man, The Frighteners, and Drowning Mona. On television, he also starred in Johnny Bago and Cover Me. What stands out about Peter Dobson is not scandal or some public downfall. The public record on his private life is pretty thin. The more interesting story is how his career gradually slowed down after his more visible years and then shifted in another direction. Starting around 2015, he was being mentioned as pursuing a directing project called Exit 102 Asbury Park, and by 2021, he was still showing up in profile pieces as a director. So Peter Dobson did not disappear. He just moved away from the center of Hollywood and quietly started looking for a way to tell his own stories. Number 11, Sam Anderson as principal. Sam Anderson is the kind of face American audiences see once and instantly recognize, even if they cannot always pull his name right away. In Forrest Gump, he plays the school principal, the man who shows up at the exact point in Forrest's early life when he is still struggling against the school system's judgment and that low IQ label. The role is not long, but it lands in exactly the right place for the audience to understand that the world around Forrest is not going to be kind. When the movie came out in 1994, Sam Anderson was 47. This year, he is 79, and by then he was already a very solid character actor on American television. Sam Anderson's path never followed the usual Hollywood star pattern. He got a real education, then spent time teaching drama at Antelope Valley College in the 1970s before fully committing to acting. That detail says a lot about him. He is not the kind of actor who lives off early glory. He is more like a skilled craftsman built for the long haul. Before and after Forrest Gump, he kept showing up in Perfect Strangers, Growing Pains, Angel Lost ER, and dozens of other series. Put simply, Sam Anderson is not the guy in the center of the poster, but he is exactly the kind of actor who makes a movie or a series feel more real. His private life is the same way, quiet and unflashy. Reliable public sources hardly show any major scandal around Sam Anderson. What people do know is that he has been married to Barbara Ann Hancock since 1985 and has 2 children. That is a very calm life, very different from the chaos a lot of other actors have had to go through. And maybe that calm is exactly why he has kept such a steady rhythm in the profession. At 79, Sam Anderson is still working, still appearing in Matlock, and still serving as consulting artistic director at the Road Theater Company. Number 12, Afemo Omilami as Drill Sergeant. Not every role in Forrest Gump needs a lot of screen time for people to remember the face, and Afemo Omilami is a very clear example of that. When the movie came out in 1994, he was 44. This year he is 76. In the film, he plays the drill sergeant, and just a few shouted lines in the barracks were enough to burn him into the audience's memory. Afemo Omilami was never an A-list star, but he has been an incredibly steady character actor. He started back in the late 70s, then showed up in a long list of films like Glory the Firm, Remember the Titans, The Blind Side, and many more. Put simply, he is the kind of supporting actor American movies always need, because the second he walks into the frame, the whole setting feels more real. In 2013, he even got an NAACP Image Award nomination, which tells you his career has never been some faded blur. What stands out even more is his life off-screen. Afemo Omilami has been married to Elizabeth Omilami since 1985, and his life has been closely tied to the family of civil rights activist Hosea Williams. He is not known because of scandal, but because he has lived close to the community, helping with work for homeless people and people in need around Atlanta. The saddest public event tied to him came in 2020 when his longtime friend Thomas Jefferson Byrd was shot and killed. Looking at Afemo Omilami today, people see a career built quietly but solidly, and from this man we move to the final name. Somebody who appeared only briefly, but carried with him a whole piece of American media history, Dick Cavett. Number 13, Dick Cavett as himself. And the final name is not an actor playing somebody else, but a whole American television icon stepping right into Forrest Gump as himself, Dick Cavett. When the movie came out in 1994, he was 58. This year he is 90. In the film, Cavett plays himself, and that detail really matters because Forrest Gump loves using American history as a real backdrop. With Dick Cavett, the movie was not just borrowing a celebrity, it was borrowing the authority of American television from a time when people still valued long, sharp, thoughtful conversations. Before he got his own show, Cavett had written for Jack Paar and Johnny Carson, and then the Dick Cavett Show became its own special part of American late-night different because of its smart voice and the fact that it did not need to overdo anything to keep an audience. But behind that polished and sharp image was a very dark battle. In 1992, Cavett went public about living with clinical depression for most of his life. He said he could seem completely normal when he needed to then go home and collapse in bed. In 1980, he had to be hospitalized and was treated with electroshock therapy, something he himself called almost miraculous. From that point on, he lived with medication and therapy on a regular basis. Then in 1997, his mental health was dragged into public view again when he left a radio program after only 2 weeks, and his lawyer confirmed the cause was a manic depressive episode. What makes Dick Cavett memorable is not just that he once had a major talk show, it is that he lived long enough with his own darkness and still kept his own voice. At 90, he is no longer at the center of American television, but he is still the name later generations of hosts mention with real respect. I've lived through half a lifetime now, and personally, I do not think life is sweet like chocolate at all. Some days it is bitter, some days it feels empty, and some days it takes away people and things we really thought would always be there. Maybe that is why every time I go back to Forrest Gump, I do not just feel like I am watching a movie. It feels like I am touching one of the most beautiful parts of America again, an America that knew how to tell stories with decency, pain, loyalty, and hope. And when I look back at this cast, that feeling gets even stronger because behind the lights, every one of them carried a life that was anything but simple. Forrest Gump is not just a great movie, it is a masterpiece America has every right to be proud of. Now it is your turn. Think of the comments section like a real fan gathering. Tell me who you remember most, which story breaks your heart the most, and how this movie touched you. And if you love old movies the same way I do, subscribe to Weird Movie Secrets, because here we do not just revisit films, we relive a whole era together